Hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. Well, today we're talking about the very first episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. It's great to have a new Star Trek show to talk about, and this first episode did not disappoint. It's the return of the self-contained episode style, which we haven't had for years. You know, Discovery and Picard have both been serialized storytelling seasons of episodes, whereas Strange New Worlds is self-contained episodic format, which is great because I don't need to speculate about what's coming up next week in terms of story, and it's kind of quite refreshing because normally I'm going, oh, I wonder if this is going to happen next week or that's going to happen next week. I don't need to do that. I can review the episode as it is in its complete format and don't have to worry about speculating about what's going to happen in the next one or whatever. So it's quite interesting. Our first episode was entitled Strange New Worlds, and it basically was a bit of a combination of a kind of getting the band back together episode in sort of the first half and a first contact episode in the second half. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please go ahead, click on that big red button to stay up to date and current with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. So much content in 2022, so be sure to click that big red button. So our first episode of Strange New Worlds starts off with a kind of a first contact experience, but from the alien perspective. We sort of think it's going to be an Earth sort of thing with Starfleet, but it turns out to be the aliens discovering a spaceship in orbit of their planet, which turns out to be a Federation starship, and that experience for them. We then move on to Montana, where Captain Pike is taking a bit of R&R. It seems like we're set up this show to happen not that long after our second season of Discovery, where Discovery, after that big battle with Control and everything, and Discovery's gone off to the 32nd century, it looks like the Enterprise has come back to Earth. They're in space dock for a bit of repairs, bit of a refit and a bit of a rejuvenation, and our crew is sort of taking a bit of shore leave at the same time. So Pike's on Earth. He's having a bit of a overnight stay with another captain friend of his, Captain Battelle. They're having breakfast together. Obviously, his communicator's going off. He's trying to get called back into service, but he just doesn't want to answer his phone because it clearly seems that Pike has got some demons weighing on his mind in the form of the visions that he saw on the Klingon moon with the time crystals, where he saw his own demise, with the whole radiation thing and being stuck in a wheelchair, and it's preying on his conscience quite a bit. And since he doesn't want to answer his phone, the Admiral who's trying to ring him ends up landing in a shuttlecraft while he's out riding his horse, and our Admiral turns out to be Admiral Robert April. Now, if you guys don't remember, Robert April was the very, very first captain of the Enterprise. He was the captain of the Enterprise, and Pike was his first officer. April became an admiral, and Pike was promoted to captain and became the second captain of the Enterprise. This is going back to Star Trek, the animated series. We also get to see the engagement of Spock. He's on Vulcan and he's getting engaged to T'Pring. We obviously saw T'Pring in a TOS episode where they were already married. I think it was in season 2 of TOS where nobody knew Spock was married, and she just shows up in an episode and goes, oh, this happens to be my wife. So we get to see Spock's engagement in this first episode of Strange New Worlds, and a little bit of Vulcan intimacy. We get a little bit more, or what was about to be a bit more than the typical little Vulcan finger rubbing or whatever it was we saw in TOS. Spock and T'Pring are about to get into it when Pike rings him on the communicator and he has to be called back to service. So I thought that was it was good to see Vulcan, good to see that engagement of Spock and T'Pring, which we'd then picked up later on down the road in original series. Next we see Pike in a shuttlecraft returning to the Enterprise while he's reading the personnel file of Lan Noonien Singh, which is to be his sort of replacement first officer, while number 1 is off and being captured by these aliens during this sort of gone wrong first contact mission. And if we're interested in Lan Noonien Singh's file that Pike's reading here, it says, Lan Noonien Singh experienced the description by Noonien Singh of the captors was vague as the child has sustained, in the words of the examining physician, substantial and heavy physical, emotional and psychological trauma, and it would be a miracle if the child were to recover to a functional level. First contact reported, species unconfirmed Gorn. However, it became more and more likely that a race known only as the Gorn were responsible for the loss of the SS Puget Sound. Gorn, not noted in the official record, refers to a mysterious race that may be the cause of several disappearances in the sector. Sole survivor of the SS Puget Sound, reported lost, Lan Noonien Singh was found alone, adrift in a Mark IV life craft by the USS Martin Luther King. Junior Ensign Chin Riley, first at location based on unverified statements by her. The family's colony ship SS Puget Sound was captured, and that's all we happen to see. And as Pike beams onto the Enterprise, we have a bit of a chat with Spock, getting him up to date with ship systems and so forth. And we interesting to hear in this scene that we're expecting a Lieutenant Kirk on this crew roster for the Enterprise. It's like, hang on, this seems a bit early to be getting Lieutenant Kirk into the show. But obviously, as we find out at the end of the episode, it's not the James T. Kirk that we kind of thought it might be. That it's actual Samuel Kirk, that's Kirk's brother. So that was a nice little misdirect, I thought, in this episode. We saw Samuel Kirk in the TOS episode. I think it was Operation Annihilate, where I think he ends up getting killed by flying parasites or something in that episode. But I noticed our character in Strange New Worlds here, they've kept the Mo. He's still got the Mo going on. So they've kept that consistent with his appearance in original series, which is, good. And according to Spock's conversation here with Pike in the corridors of the Enterprise, it's been around 3 months and 10 days since the crew was doing the whole thing with the Discovery, with the fight against Control. So that gives us a pretty good idea as to when this series is set after the events of Season 2 of Discovery. And it's good we get to meet all of our bridge crew. We've got Lan Noonien Singh, who we meet as the Chief of Security. We've got Ortigas on the helm, Uhura on comms. It's a fun little introductory scene of our new crew members. And as we're launching, Pike's seeing, images of himself reflected in his little console there, where he's got his own demise on his mind from what he saw in the Klingon time crystals. So it's weighing pretty heavily on him, it seems. And at this point, we move from the getting the band back together vibe for this episode to the actual mission of the episode, which is basically a working warp drive has been detected on this planet named Kylie, and they're going to investigate. This is what Una's done on the USS Archer. Nice to see the USS Archer named after, obviously, Captain Archer from Enterprise, and they've lost contact with the ship that went to make first contact with this race that is seemingly to have developed a functional warp drive. So that's what the Enterprise is off to investigate. And we get a nice scene between Spock and Pike in Pike's ready room, where he basically goes over what he experienced on the Klingon moon Boreth, seeing his own death and everything. And Spock just kind of reminding him of, sort of suck it up and pull it together, I guess. It's unfortunate, but he sort of has to deal with that somehow and has to move past it to be able to do his job effectively as captain. And before long, we find out that the planet that they're visiting is sort of like mid-21st century level of development, and they haven't in fact developed warp drive at all. They've used warp technology to develop a bomb, which isn't the best of news. And after a fun introduction with Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel, we find out that we're getting back in this episode to that old Star Trek storytelling chestnut of the crew disguising themselves as the local aliens to avoid any breaches of the Prime Directive, where they infiltrate the society to achieve their ultimate mission. We've had plenty of episodes like this in the past in Star Trek. The actual first episode entitled First Contact in Next Generation, and there was a few episodes also in Enterprise where the crew had to don alien makeup to blend in with the locals or whatever to achieve their mission. It's a staple of Star Trek storytelling, and it's a nice way to ease into our first episode of Strange New Worlds. And it appears like like this planet is undergoing some civil unrest. There's obviously a couple of warring factions bickering with one another, that there's protests going on about, and we get a bit of historical news where Pike brings up the United States of America, and Spock refers to his familiarity with their two civil wars, obviously referring to the original Civil War in the 1800s, but also what appears to be historical facts of a second American Civil War, which I'm guessing is in reference to sort of events in a not too distant future from where we are now, which centre around a civil war such as what was experienced on January 6, with more of a, I guess, Republican versus Democrat kind of civil war in the US. So they're sort of shining a light on current events in the world, particularly the US, and the division that is, currently there between different factions of the political arena. And just kind of, I guess, saying, we need to be careful that the road we're heading down, because, it's potentially not a great one. Good to see Spock using the Vulcan nerve pinch on a couple of the scientists here so they can assume their identity. And also good, I think, that he pointed out that it was fortunate that this particular maneuver would work on their physiology. I think in original series, I think Spock was just nerve pinching everybody and it would work on everybody no matter what race they were. But I think it was good to acknowledge that, hey, different races have different physiology and different pressure points and all that sort of thing. And, sometimes it works and maybe sometimes it doesn't. So I'm glad that they added that clarification to the historic Vulcan nerve pinch maneuver. It was a fun scene with Chapel chasing down the scientist who'd gone on a bit of a run through the Enterprise hallways to escape medbay, and then obviously having to inject him and all that sort of stuff. Nice little, obviously, also greeting or introduction here between Uhura and Chapel and this little pursuit. And also very technical maneuvers by Transporter Chief Kyle, where he actually has to beam the medical sample from our alien fella that Chapel extracts out of him directly into Spock's eye. That's some pretty precise transporter work, and I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like that done before. But at least they did mention that transporters aren't normally designed to work that way. So yeah, some pretty precision transporting work there to beam a liquid sample from a hypospray directly into a person's eyeball or something. I think that's a first. Now, when the team rescues number one and her colleagues from the cell they're being held in under the facility that they're infiltrating, it was a bit unclear to me exactly how this race got warp drive, because from what I gather, there was, hundreds of ships in that last battle, against Control, Federation and Klingon, Kelpian and whatever, all up there, opening the wormhole to get to the 32nd century. So if this planet Kylie was nearby and their telescopes were, powerful enough to see, a big fight going on in orbit that occurred in season 2 of Discovery, I'm not sure how they just through looking through a telescope at various different ships was able to give them enough information to build a warp core. It's not like they had schematics or blueprints or anything like that, or even a damaged ship that had crash landed on their planet. They're just saying that they looked through a telescope and saw a whole bunch of spaceships in a fight, and a wormhole opened up to the 32nd century. That wouldn't really give them enough to go on scientifically, I would have thought, to build a functioning warp core. That's a bit like saying, I know how to build an iPhone just by showing somebody a blurry, out of focus photo of one. There's a lot of intricate mechanisms and computer chips and programming and stuff that goes into making an iPhone. You can't just show somebody a photo of one and they automatically know how to build one in every kind of detail. You need blueprints or schematics, or at least one to, disassemble and then re-engineer it, I would have thought. And ultimately, to solve the conflict, Pike has to break the Prime Directive and expose the Enterprise to the alien world in order to get the warring factions to come together. There's nothing like an outside threat to get, people, I guess, to come to realise, hey, we're existing in a much bigger world here and we need to put our petty differences aside. And Pike uses examples from Earth's past to effectively demonstrate that, where he talks about the Second Civil War, which is in reference to the sort of, I guess, events that follow the January 6th, storming of the Capitol building and civil unrest, in terms of the political factions in the United States, which is hopefully not where we're headed, in terms of a second American Civil War between, I guess, Republicans and Democrats, and then the eugenics wars. So we've retconned the eugenics wars not to the 90s as was in original series, but corrected that to sometime in the period between 2025 and 2050, and then talking about the Third World War. And this is the direction that this race is heading in if they don't pull up their socks. So this episode definitely goes to shining a light on present events in the world, looking at the unrest that's going on politically at the moment, and the fact that we really need to just chill out a bit and watch out, because we don't want to end up like the Star Trek history, which ends in a Third World War. I think this episode definitely goes to shining a bit of a light on current events and where we could potentially be headed. And in our briefing with Admiral April at the end, I think it was good to see in terms of the reference to Discovery and the battle there and how they got warp drive and everything, and the fact that they're renaming General Order 1 the Prime Directive. I think that's good, because it always felt a bit weird to me, them saying, General Order 1. It not as catchy sounding as the Prime Directive. I think it's got a much better ring to it. So I'm glad that they've changed the terminology now to reflect what had generally been, always referred to as the Prime Directive. All in all, I thought this was a really strong first episode of Strange New Worlds. I love the fact that we're back to episodic storytelling, not serialized storytelling, because I don't need to speculate about what we're going to see next week. I can just review an episode as it exists, and we don't have to wonder, is this character going to do this, or we're going to have this going to happen, or that going to happen. I can just talk about it in a self-contained format, which is really refreshing. Guys, please leave a super thanks if you're able to. It really helps the channel out. Like and comment if you can't do so. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and check out my merch in the merch store, where for another, I think it's just one more day, you can pick up 15% off all my merch. This is a really popular design. It's my new Starfleet ships and their captains design, which has got all of the Enterprises, or all of the starships and their captains available in my merch store. It's my most popular one, so be sure to check that out and you can get 15% off. I will see you guys very soon for my next video. I'll catch you soon.